All right, I'm sitting here with Colby Beecham. We this started out because I had a patellofemoral case. I posted on my Instagram. I had people. I said reply with advice, and then people sent me a bunch of advice. And yours was really interesting about the thermostat analogy, and that's why I wanted to get you on. Anyways, we've since had a little back and forth, had a phone conversation. And yeah, we're gonna get patellofemoral pain, probably other types of knee pain, maybe Achilles pain. Why don't you tell everyone who you are?
Yeah, my name's Colby. I'm a physical therapist, originally from Virginia Beach, Virginia. That's where I started my career, went to school and everything. I recently moved to Tampa, Florida, like 2 months ago. So started my practice down here, which is Onward Physical Therapy. It's a franchise company around the states, but I own this one at this location. So yeah, we're starting up. So it's an out of network practice that treats pretty much anybody between the ages of a teenager to early 50s, 60s that wants to get after their health, whether they're a CrossFitter, high rocks person, weightlifter, ball sport athlete, and they just want to take that time. So we're not going to have techs or assistants. We're doing one-on-one care and getting after it with a lot of hands-on work if needed, or a lot of gym work if needed as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I got into tendons because of my own patellar tendon pain. Why did
Mhm.
you get into physical therapy?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So I left school, high school, thinking I want to do something with medicine. Like, the science classes always gravitated towards that, and I was like, well, orthopedic surgeon. Let's go to the top. Like, that's just kind of where the thoughts were. You get into college, and you're taking basic classes anyways. Started to talk to guidance counselor what that looked like of school years and time, and I'm like, that's a lot. Playing college football, I didn't have to make a big decision for year one, and unfortunately, tore my bicep at the elbow, popped off tackling this kind of outstretched arm and popped. So I had the surgery. That's a pretty easy surgery. They just attached the tendon back onto the bone. I obviously did physical therapy, so I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. Like still working with people, working with injuries, but it's kind of on the backside of things. And so as time went on, just like kind of gravitated towards the rehab portion of like the whole timeline. So kind of gravitated towards that with schooling, and then throughout my football career, obviously was in the training room a lot, so got to work with ATs and PTs and whatnot. So just kind of gravitated towards that. So yeah, pretty cliche story. I
Yeah,
got hurt. I thought it was cool. Did it.
how is okay? So I Jeffrey Wolf is he's also in Florida. He tore his distal bicep tendon, but he never got it repaired, and he's just dealing with it. What? Yeah,
Nice.
because what was the decision to get yours repaired? Was that just the norm?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's normal. I mean, being a freshman in college, like I still was going to play college football, and to not have your bicep, the elbow, like, I mean, there was definitely a strength thing. It was interesting. It hurt real bad for like 3 seconds, and I was like, oh, well, we're good. I'm in the training room the next day, and I'm like doing like some elbow rehab they had me doing. And the trainer's like, dude, you don't have a bicep. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't have a bicep? Like, it doesn't hurt that bad. It's like it's sore. He's like, yeah, because it's completely torn. I have a really cool picture of like me like from the side of like elbow at 90. Right side looks normal. Left side is just like that big, like
Mm.
huge hump up here in the shoulders, like the Popeye sign. But it was such a clean tear off the tendon that there really was no bleeding, and it didn't really hurt that bad. So it was just a really interesting injury, and that's where my tendon issues started, if you will.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah.
Okay. The other one I wanted to talk about. You tore your Achilles? Yeah. Tell me
Yeah,
tell me
so then,
about that.
yeah, so the bicep was probably like 2017, probably 10, 16, something like that. Achilles was 2.5 years ago. So, played college football, got done with that, got into CrossFit a bit competing because it's just something, you can compete in forever. So it's just kind of fun. Was doing a competition down in South Carolina, and I mean, there's a whole backstory to why I think it happened, but basically how it happened was the workout was double unders with the jump rope, some handstand push-ups, some snatches overhead, AMRAP, you going around. And I was doing double unders. Last rep was done, so done. Threw the rope down, did like your false step split. Back foot went backwards, popped. I go forward, no Achilles. So I felt that, thought something rolled into me. So I kind of stood there and was like, that's interesting. Like looked around to see like if a barbell had rolled into me. Nothing there. As a PT, I'm like, fuck. So I kind of sat down, felt the Achilles, like could feel a divot, and I'm like, okay, well, this doesn't hurt that bad. So like maybe it's a partial tear. So I'm just like not gonna walk on it. So got the crutches or whatever. Went home, got the MRI, and it was a full tear, unfortunately. So I had that repaired. So yeah, tendon number two.
Was there signs beforehand that it was gonna go or not?
I mean, not necessarily. So I kind of shifted training probably 6 months prior to that and ran a half marathon, just something I wanted to do. So I was doing a lot of running, and outside I'd have like calf hip flexor issues, but I'm a college football player that weighs 230 and I started running a half marathon, like it's gonna hurt. It's just not normal to switch that training that quickly. So I didn't think anything of it, never had an issue, like real issue. Once I got done with the half marathon, stopped running, obviously. Got back into doing more CrossFit and never really had an issue with it. That weekend there was a box jump workout, there was a rope climb workout where you fall from the rope. There was a mile run portion of a workout. So there was some calf loading, but never had any issues with it at all. No pain prior, like never had calf issues, and then it was gone. So, yeah, just super interesting.
Yeah. And then so you got it repaired. You went through the whole
Yeah,
rehab process.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So
how's it been now?
yeah, so went through the whole rehab process of that from surgery one for a year and a half, just rehabbing it, like really struggling with strength, just like the push off ability of it. And I actually got a second opinion from a doctor, and he had a lot to say about what the first surgeon did, being just not what you're supposed to do from a conservative rehab protocol, and then I actually how he did the surgery. So I did get a revision, which was a Z plastic. He shortened my tendon to give me a better push off, and that has made a huge difference. So I'm about a year out from that now. And then there's definitely a clear difference from surgery one, but the amount of atrophy I accumulated from just downtime from the tear to the surgery, two surgeries, a complicated first. It's weak. But I can pretty much do everything I want to do. But if I had to like sprint or be explosive off one foot, I can't do that. Really. But I'm also not a ball sport athlete anymore necessarily, so it's not necessarily limiting to me as much as maybe someone that's still in those years of exercising or doing those kind of sports.
So that was a case where that the Achilles was too long.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, long story short, like the second surgeon had said the sutures he used to sew my tendon back up, they don't use anymore because they're known to stretch out, which is just crazy to me. Then also his rehab protocol was pretty conservative. Like I wasn't walking at all for 8 weeks, and then it was like each week you kind of tear down the boot. It's just between 5 weeks between tear and surgery, and then 8 weeks of non-weight bearing. I mean, you're talking months of just no load through the tendon and muscle. So like the amount of atrophy that happened is just crazy. So when I got back to doing rehab, I mean, I think it was really cooked at that point, even with the surgery, putting it back together. It just all that downtime was not good for it. So.
Uh-huh. Have you seen in your practice? Have you seen many Achilles? Like, does this story has this story been replicated?
So I would say no, honestly. So it's funny. So when I tore my Achilles in the past year and a half, I've seen three different three. One was an older lady that literally like stepped backwards and tore it. I mean, she's older, never worked out a day in her life, but super low expectations of what she wanted to get back to. So she got back to 100% in like 8 months. I mean, she just wanted to be able to walk and do stairs, and like so she crushed for her. So she did great. Two other guys that are like middle-aged dudes that like they played some rec soccer, basketball type. That's how they ended up tearing it, was a basketball and soccer recreationally. One dude, I mean, was like a miracle. 7 months later, I mean, heel raise heights 100%, jump testing looked great, and slowing it down with the camera felt really good. Like he looked great 7 months later. That's crazy. Other guys probably in the boat of just a slow rehab. Like it was he's over a year at this point, feeling probably 80 to 85%, which is probably pretty typical for your average Joe. So he'll get there, but it's just slow. For there's some decent Stockholm studies or case studies out there of like NFL players and what the timeline looks like when they're actually testing people, and like if they're getting back within a year or two, the average person, it ain't going to be a year or two. It's going to be several, if at all, to get that full hero raise. So, but measuring that full hero raise to get to 100%, that's freaking good from what I've seen. Like I think that's pretty rare, to be honest.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, so we were talking off air about your like education, physical therapy. You were saying it was pretty good, but this I get it even for myself, just looking into tendons myself and talking to people, a lot of physical therapists, and they say
Yeah.
they don't really have this good education of how to rehab people with tendons. Was it similar for you?
Yeah, I would agree. And I think it really comes down to like their exposure to strength conditioning principles at the base. Like, did we get education on that in school? For sure. But like was it to the level to where I would feel like, well, maybe not me, but the average person feeling confident to like, yeah, I could take someone through like a really good progressive overloaded program and like get them back to, I could PR someone's back squat. I could PR someone's deadlift. Like, if you can't say that as a PT, that's freaking tough, man. And unfortunately, school, I wouldn't say sets you up that great. Like you might, like, just thinking back to like we had a guy come in and like show us a lot of specific stuff for baseball players or show us some specific stuff for this population. But like as a group, did we go through like, hey, this is how we deadlift, this is how we squat, this is how we bench, this is how we clean, this is what progressive overload looks like, and taking a lot of time to that? No, not at all. So a lot of my education was just from me working out through all my college sports. And then getting a CSCS and just personal training people. They didn't necessarily had pain, or maybe they did a little bit, but it was literally just people getting, or weight loss people or whatever, like just practice reps. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Um, okay. Going, well, the Achilles tendon, um,
yeah,
kind of probably the next similar thing is the patellar quad tendon. But
yeah,
if we go to I guess going to the knee first to go this initial conversation we had, patellofemoral joint. Um, I've probably done a few podcasts with people, conversations, and I'm always just like, there's such a lack of practical stuff that's useful for the patellofemoral joint. So could you start by this message we had in this thermostat analogy, kind of how you're thinking of things? How are you thinking of patellofemoral joint pain?
yeah. So like comparing that to your quad or patellar tendinopathy, which is that's a tissue injury, that's a tissue issue. We have to fix that whole system for that aspect. Where patellofemoral pain to me, I use this thermostat analogy of like, if that knee is cold down to the bottom and it's feeling great, it's good. Now, as the temperature goes up, and we want to call that stress, volume, intensity, so what that looks like over a span of time. Patellofemoral pain to me, I look at it on the scale of like, okay, is that knee super hot, or where they can't walk without pain, they can't do stairs without pain, or they can't do like, a jump and run and sprint kind of pain. Like those are different irritability tests for me. Like how hot is this knee is how I kind of conceptualize it and educate people. And then with rehab sense on that scale, like we do need to push it. We need to be on somewhere on that temperature gauge. If it's all the way at the bottom, nothing's going to change. If we're just doing TKs in a lying position, and we're doing passive range of motion, and we're biking, like it's never going to get better. Or if we're way overdosing that person, well, now they're super hot. It's just going to be more inflammatory and be not productive either. So like finding that sweet spot, and that's a tough place to kind of find without trial and error. Unfortunately, I don't think there's some book that's going to tell you where to start with that. And something we also talked about was like, like how do you guess on rest days? Like, because there's definitely some people that are super hot that are like, hey, look, we're doing this every fifth day. Where if someone that's more on that lower scale, we might be doing this every other day, which is, your typical rest period. But yeah, so I think of it more as a system issue over like a tissue specific issue as compared to like a tendinopathy where, hey, we're looking at lifestyle factors, we're looking at sleep, we're looking at above and below joints. Like, okay, now are you overloading this tissue? Like, hey, look, you're doing CrossFit and you squatted Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Yeah, it's going to blow up. Or you're playing basketball and like, hey, dude, well, you played every single day this week. Like, there's going to be some repercussions of that. We have to like maybe at this point talk about that frequency a little bit. So kind of looking like taking a step back and looking at the whole person over just looking at that specific tissue where a tendon, I think you can kind of focus in a little bit more like, maybe you don't necessarily care as much on like the ankle and the hip as much as you would do like patellofemoral pain.
Hmm. So how are you confirming um this patellofemoral pain when I get on these most of my phone consults are for knee pain like patellar tendon, patellofemoral, and I just trying to get a backstory like the pain
Yeah.
location, things that how are you like differentiating these two, patellofemoral joint pain versus patellar tendon or quad tendon pain?
Yeah, I'd say one is definitely like just like what bothers it. So for me, like if it's a patellar tendon or quad tendon, like it should be like a very specific knee loaded thing where like if you're doing step to me, I mean maybe you've seen different too. Like for the tendons, like typically like walking around and stairs or sitting on the like stuff like that, the tendon should be fine. Like, it's not being loaded. Now, I think like the one of the things you talked about it, which is definitely true, is like your person in the car that has the knee bent for several hours or sitting, like sometimes that can kind of flow that tendon up. And that's where I do think like tendon pain and then that patellofemoral pain, there probably is a lot of overlap or have people having kind of a little bit of both. But differentiating between the two, like That's definitely a tough thing. I think it's more of like how it responds to load. Like for a tendon, sometimes they'll warm up. Patellofemoral pain, I feel like doesn't warm up as much. Like typically it gets worse and it really blows up like right afterwards. Where a tendon might warm up and then like that next morning or that night, it kind of is like, oh yeah, no, like, I definitely did too much. But I think there's a lot of blend of like the characteristics of both. And I think the treatment for it necessarily isn't super different either. Like, do we need to work on some quad strength? Do we need to work on some, strength around the knee for sure? But for patellofemoral pain, I definitely think that it's a little bit harder to start with exercise A, where if it's a quad tendon, like there's a little bit easier for progression of like, I'm going to start with like a lower level exercise and then kind of work your way up, whether it be a Spanish squat or a knee extension or some type of like more of a hip hinge dominant squat or something, and then just kind of let's just walk up that scale. Where patellofemoral pain sometimes is a little bit more elusive to where like some people like Spanish squats kill them, where other people it's like, dude, these are great. Like these actually like feel so much better than a normal squat. Where some people a step up is great, or it's that like it's not. So like it's just like super big trial and error. I think it for me patellofemoral pain is just a little bit more like widespread. I guess the way to put it. Like it's not super predictable, where quad tendon maybe is a little bit more.
Yeah, so that thing of like trying to get some load through the quad, because it's like I guess like the Greg Lehman thing is just like what is he? He'll just say like anterior knee pain, you know? Like we don't need to
Yeah,
get
yeah,
too
yeah.
specific on things. And then I do appreciate
Sure.
that side, but the other side, I'm like, well, I like to know as well, because it kind of give you a picture of maybe what's going on. But yeah, the Spanish squat a few years ago had a hockey girl that had like patellar tendon because everyone thinks they have patellar tendon pain, and I'm just like, all right, let's try this Spanish squat, and it just blew up the front of the knee, like bad, like
Yeah.
burning. And I was just like, okay, that's probably not a good exercise. When you get a case like that, well, that's hard because it's like some people with patellofemoral, they'll love it and they'll feel great, and some people it's like terrible for the anterior knee. Um, are you just experimenting with different exercises to try to get load through the quadriceps, or what are you doing?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, like so, and this is where like I think there's a good value to being a person to where like if someone's like that irritable, like they can't tolerate any form of a Spanish squat ISO or any like not even like no, non-loaded like that. To me, that's creeping up on that irritability. That temperature on that scale is a little bit higher. So like that's where I will lead into like some manual therapy, whether it be like some cupping to decompress the quad or dry needling or something, just to, like decompress that knee a little bit to make it a little bit more happy, and then kind of revisit that. And if it doesn't make a difference at all, which sometimes it doesn't, like, okay, that's super high irritability, where that's where I'm kind of going in the bucket of like some load's better than no load. Like maybe this person does just need some blood flow. Maybe they do, maybe at that point they are just like, hey, we just need to like really look at your volume through a week. Let's do some walking, some biking, some hip dominant stuff. Like let's just start around the joint. Or if someone did tolerate that, like okay, like that's your starting spot. Kind of okay, cool. And yeah, I mean, I guess that answers the question. Like, I think it definitely like the irritability of it is what I'm searching for, and then finding which exercise is tolerated more. Which I know there's definitely some good scales out there of like patellofemoral loading scale, but I think that's great biomechanically. But sometimes it kind of gets thrown in a loop for people that like the scale isn't this perfect. Like, oh, if I just start at the top, I'm good, and I work my way down. Generally, yes, but some of those can be definitely flip flop for people.
Yeah. So this whole irritability thing, you're trying to figure out how like irritable they are. What are the tests? Are you doing these on like day one? Someone comes in patellofemoral joint pain, and you're like, here's a battery of tests you're running through, or what are you doing?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I have a great example of a guy who this year he was marathon training, so he's CrossFitter, so same kind of situation where his running volume's going up super heavy. Um Came in and like basically went through a bunch of passive range of motion. I'm cranking his knee into extension, cranking his knee into flexion, doing all your ligament testing, no issues whatsoever. Was like just manual muscle testing his quad, no issues whatsoever. We did test it on a dynamometer, and his quad was within 95%, so quad strength looked great. No pain with it. I'm like, okay, let's do some jump testing. So we're doing just a box jump to see how he looks, doing a single leg jump to see how he looks. And like overall looks pretty good. I'm like, okay, well, that's super low irritability, could reproduce his pain. And then as we're walking back to the treatment room, he's like, there it is, it's starting to hurt. I'm like, okay, what it took all of those things to now decrease pain. So low irritability, but also he's marathon training. So and he's putting in tens of 20s of miles a week. Like, okay, well, like this is good news. Like we found your pain, but this showed me today it's not super specific to one thing. It's really a volume thing. It took time to start heating up, heating up, heating up. Where if I'd have took that person through like a bunch of jumping that day, I'd imagine it would have been like super flared up by the end of that or that night. Or that's telling me the irritability is a little bit different compared to if I take someone and I just crank on their knee on the table and it causes pain. I'm like, all right, well, we're not jumping today. We're probably not testing your quad. There's not good information. Like, and it's going to be painful, obviously. So there's no reason to do it. So starting with like the simplest of things, which is just cranking on the knee, and then like slowly working my way up that ladder of like how hard do I have to go to make this hurt? And with that guy individually, I was like, hey, look, I know this like sucks, but this gives me good information of where we need to start. Like, we're not going to start with a bunch of basic stuff. We need to really look at your volume and start on some strengthening and whatnot. But we're not going to start with body weight exercises or TKEs or a body weight Spanish squat. Like, let's start with a split squat. Let's, work on some hamstring stuff. Really like dug into his training program and what he's not doing. So like that's kind of how like an eval would look for someone. That's just like a recent example.
Hmm. Um, so I recently Eric Mara, is that how you say his name? Mira? Familiar? He's like
I
a
don't think so. No.
physical therapist somewhere, but he was did a had a tendon podcast, and he was talking
Mm,
about when someone has the patellar tendon pain or the Achilles pain, doing a strength test to quantify the pain for the person, because it's like if your patellar tendon hurts, get on a leg extension, it's like you're 50% weaker than the other side. Like you just
mm.
quantified. Here's what you probably need to work on with the patellofemoral pain. I feel like it has to be hard to quantify things. Would you agree with that? Because it's like it's so
Yeah.
random. It seems like you can't just like they might be really good on a leg extension side to side, and then um, is it always this thing where well that was just your case of like you do enough things and the volume starts to creep up, and then the thermostat tells you this thing's kind of hot. Like how do you get anything? Go back to your case, how do you get anything objective out of that? Or is the thermostat analogy the objective thing for you?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for me, like, obviously we're not like, hey, dude, we did this, 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 and this. Like, okay, that's like your volume limit because like, what does that stuff mean? It's all different stuff. There's no way to quantify that. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely more lucrative where, if I have a quad tendinopathy that's been going on for 8 months, I put you on a knee extension machine and yeah, your quad's 65% outside. Like, that's the problem. That's what we're working on for the next several months. Super straightforward. Sounds easier than it is because obviously days are going to go up and down with pain and it's going to be a loop-de-loop of like where the symptoms are, but there's a clear issue, there's a clear like resolve for this is quad loading. Like, we need to get you there. With patellofemoral pain, like a lot of those guys, especially if it's acute like that, like we tested his quad because it was non-painful, but his quad's not weak. It's not the issue. So that's where you kind of have to take a step back from me and like, okay, what other levers can we pull on your lifestyle, whether it be volume, whether it be nutrition or whatever. And I'll say a lot of cases for your average people is like digging into someone's diet and sleep is an easy factor. Like, dude, if you're 200 pounds, you're eating 100 grams of protein, you're sleeping 5 hours a night in your marathon training, like you don't have the building blocks to sustain this. Like, something's going to break down. And why that happens, maybe we do a running analysis on somebody and see that, they have some funky running stuff, but like typically it's whatever's going to break first. He's loading the knee a lot with all the running. So yeah, I mean, quantifying that stuff can be tough. Like, no, I will say we quantify things where like, if you had a pain in a deep squat and you're on your right side and your hip range of motion, your right side is super limited. Well, we're going to quantify that range of motion and improve that. Like, we're tracking that stuff or your dorsiflexion of your ankle for the same reason. But a lot of it's just like managing load. Like, hey, look, like I think really like the rest analogy is probably the biggest thing. Like, hey, look, like we loaded it on Monday. You took Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday off, loaded it on Thursday. You tolerated that super well. Like that's your rest interval at this point. That's maybe what we're definitely quantifying as a rest interval. And we want to get you to the point where, hey, we're reverting at Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or 3 days a week. Your typical 48 hours of rest for just normal tissue healing, and then getting after it with strength training or whatever their goals are. But yeah, I mean, to quantify stuff is definitely harder. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, so you had that like the Monday, Wednesday, Friday is the usual thing for you for loading. But you had that example of like some every like fifth day, I think, maybe on a phone call we were talking about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
what makes you decide on that with a person of like I'm only gonna load you once every 5 days.
Yeah. So I mean, it's definitely not my good. Like I've never started someone with that, like even the highest suitability person. But like another good example of I had a girl who like she was a photographer that's just like all over the place. She's on her feet all day. She also dances. She does some powerlifting. Not great diet, not great sleep, traveling a lot. It's a lot of lifestyle factors that's telling me she's not recovering well. We started with like every other day. It wasn't going well. Just felt like, some days she could load it, some days she couldn't. And we're talking like super minor loading. I was like, okay, well, let's do every third day. And then every fourth. Then we got to the point where we're like, hey, look, let's load this every fifth day. And then that's where I think you are. And it ended up being like a turning point where we weren't, and when she could load it, setting herself up to have a good day, she was putting 3, 4, 5 training days in a row. Like, hey, look, that went pretty solid. Like, okay, cool. Like, we can work with that. Where for the beginning, it was like, I loaded it Monday, kind of went shitty. I tried to load it again Wednesday. I had to quit because it was so painful. I rested, and then it's just like all over the place. Like we're not getting any traction. We're not doing any progressive overload. Some days we had to quit. It's like we're literally going backwards if anything. So like for me, it's you start with optimal, and then you start to like kind of regress from that if needed, based on someone's like actually getting it done. But I think a lot of lifestyle factors have to do with that, not necessarily. And it might be the exercises. Like I might have picked the perfect set of stuff for you to do at the beginning. We might need to adjust that too. But I'd say lifestyle stuff is like the biggest thing to pull with that.
Hmm. Um, so when we talk about loading for like the patellofemoral pain and like the Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or like the once every fifth day, um, for you, what do you deem as loading that joint? Is it anything that's like hitting the quads hard? So how do you look at like calf loading, hamstring loading, hip hinge? Is that like a rest day for the patellofemoral joint?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would say like specifically like anterior loading. I guess it depends on someone. I've definitely had someone that like hamstring curls bother me too. So I mean, I would say that for that person, something they can do pain free is considered not loading day. Where if it is that anterior knee pain, um, and we can load the hamstrings or glutes or calves, and it's like really like no issue. Like, okay, we'll do those on the in between days, but like that training day, that's gonna be anterior loading of the knee. Yeah.
Hmm.
So obviously more quad stuff. Yeah.
Um,
Squat lunge.
yeah. So one thing that I think I talked to Rich Willie on like some of the passive modalities, and like one of the few in the research is the patellofemoral joint taping.
Yeah.
That, but yeah, what's been your experience? Because yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'd say I've probably under 10 people have used that. And the one girl that we got on the fifth day was definitely someone I experimented that with. I don't know. Like, would I say it made a groundbreaking difference? Obviously not, because we had to regress to every fifth day of loading. But was it something I'll try with someone when they're kind of like not progressing? For sure. It's not something I'm ever doing on day one, or probably even like the second or third like option of what we're doing loading wise or frequency wise or whatever. But it's something I'll pull with people, or I'd say the person more so with like Achilles stuff. Maybe it's just because like the runners I'll see I'll do it. But if someone's like coming in, this is their first to third day of me seeing them, they're like, hey, I got this run next weekend, I'm doing it. I'm like, okay, well, let's tape your knee just to see if it's going to help anyways, more or less to get by. So I mean, it's a band-aid. I mean, for me, like taping's a band-aid. Like no one wants their knee taped for the rest of their life. Like I don't want them to rely on that. I don't want them to think that's the way out at all. So like it's something I'm definitely using pretty sparingly.
Hmm. The other passive things, what have you seen that's useful? I mean, you're probably aware like passive modalities, manual therapy kind of gets hated on in the pain world, but yeah, what things have worked for you?
Yeah, I mean, I did a ton of dry needling, cupping, to the quad or around the knee, just so that for an energizing effect. Like just get some blood flow through there with some dry needling. The needle going in, there's some good research on just neurologically kind of resetting that pain modulation a little bit. And it's really just doing that so you can hopefully load it more later. And we'll do this at time like, hey, look, let's dump into a single leg wall sit. Let's go do a knee extension. Your pain's we'll call it a 6, whatever that means, doesn't matter. But if we go do a passive modality, come back and it feels better. Well, if we can load it a little bit more today, that's a win. I mean, I don't care what it's doing necessarily. And if someone does have a tight quad or something, because a lot of times you just have some guarding from the quad and some patellofemoral quad tendinopathy or whatever, instead of stretching it, increasing that patellofemoral like just forces that might take it off, if anything. Let's just decompress it a little bit, take some tension off the knee, and if so, we can load it afterwards. Like, is that going to fix the knee? Absolutely not. But if we can load it afterwards a little bit, like that's a win to me.
Hmm. I think it was probably Jill Cook way back in the day, podcast with her. I did a couple on like patellofemoral versus
Yeah,
patellar
I'm
tendon.
sure I've listened to him.
Yeah, and one of her things, which I was like, I couldn't really. I don't. I never really. It was like isometrics are going to make patellofemoral pain worse. I don't want to say that. That's kind of the sentiment I got from some of those conversations, and I was just like, it just never sat well with me. If we go back to what like the Spanish squat for some people is going to be great, some
Yeah.
people it's the worst thing in the world. Um, when you get patellofemoral people versus like patellar tendon or quad tendon, are you using isometrics in both groups, like experimenting with them, or do you think like they are they worse for a patellofemoral joint or is it individual?
Yeah, yeah, I would say I definitely use them in both to trial, but I think what tendency is like, and maybe that's a diagnosis factor as well. Like I think pretty consistently, if you have a tendon issue and we do some ISOs in the right way, it's going to feel better afterwards, like pretty quickly actually, like within that session, if we will, or that day. Where patellofemoral pain, sometimes it makes it worse. They're sitting there in an ISO and we're 20 degrees into a knee bend on a wall sit, and they're like, my knee's starting to hurt more. I'm like, okay, let's stop doing that. It's like definitely it's a trial thing. Like, but I would tend to say like patellofemoral pain definitely leans towards ISOs don't work as much, but with and then like tendon stuff, I definitely think they work a lot more. So maybe that's a diagnostic factor as well. But why that is, like, I think it's tough to like really like give a great answer like with the tendon. And you great have a ton of great posts on like the analogy of or not analogy, the literal like absorption of water in the tendon causing some pain and that squeezing that water out. Like that's what it's doing. Like that's literally what it's doing. Where there isn't that factor going in there with patellofemoral pain. Like it's more of a system issue. So that just time under tension of a 2-minute wall sit or wherever the person's at 30 seconds of a wall sit for patellofemoral pain is just cranking that thermometer up. It's like, hey, look, like the time under tension is super high now, and it doesn't like that.
Yeah, I had a phone consult today. A guy with an older guy, 40, he's 40 years old, with patellar tendon, rehabbing his patellar tendon, making a lot of progress. And then he was telling me he does that iso lunge, and um, his front knee just feels awful afterwards, like
Yeah,
terrible. And I was kind of suspecting some patellofemoral the whole call. And like at that moment, I was like, dude, that does not happen to a tendon. That has to
yeah,
be some
yeah,
patellofemoral pain. And then I kind of was thinking, I was just like, maybe it's that hold and that. Well, I don't know if you curious on your feedback here, but I'm like, I told him instead of doing like a 2 minute isometric hold, could you match the time of 2 minutes and just go in and out of the range, you know? And
sure.
I wonder if that would feel better for the patellofemoral joints. But your thing of like increasing the irritability, I'm just like, I don't know if you've seen this. Are reps typically better tolerated than holds? Or if for you, are you just looking at it like they're both going to increase that temperature?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just maybe like time under tension is a factor you can pull, right? Like you can increase time under tension, tempo, intensity, volume, right? It's all your factors. Where I think with I guess it just depends on what you want to do. But with patellofemoral pain, like time under tension, I think is just for whatever reason, I don't have a great answer for why, is just a factor that's a lot more harder to like pull on. If that time of tension is higher, it just tends to tick that knee off more. Where reps, with a controlled tempo, but not necessarily a long tempo, it just seems to maybe tolerate it more. And why that is, I don't think I have a great answer. Just I think time under tension is one of those things that could kind of just cause a knee to ache when it's like more of a system issue.
Hmm. Um, So on our phone call, we were kind of talking about. I think they did some of those studies on like patellofemoral. I think it was patellofemoral joint stress, and I could be wrong. It's
Yeah,
been like years since I've looked into this, but it was like the deeper squats are can be higher patellofemoral joint stress. So it's like people with patellofemoral pain is like maybe you could limit the squat depth or something. But then when you get on the
yeah,
leg extension, it was like the patellofemoral. It's like it flips, and when you're more extended, it's more patellofemoral joint stress than when you're in a
yeah,
deeper knee bend. So then you would, and you can't ever take something like the patellofemoral joint stress is going to be reflective of pain symptoms because it's never that
no,
simple. Pain is never that simple. But
no,
were you telling me like you've had some people though like patellofemoral joint pain and like that straight leg extension is actually pretty well tolerated?
yeah,
You
yeah,
said yeah.
for sure, yeah, for sure, yeah, yeah, that's actually probably one of the Eh, I mean, I'm pretty biased towards a knee extension. I think it's great. If you have knee pain, like how fast can I get you to do a knee extension? Just like with a low back, how fast can I get you to do a deadlift? Like that's just like that's my road. But yeah, I mean, I definitely have had some people where they tolerate that. 20-degree knee bend isos, or just working that top range just gets some contractions, which is really just a TKE with a band, but we can like quantifiably load it. Where your green band is easy, hard. Where if I have 20 pounds of knee extension, you can tolerate this shortened range of motion. Like, okay, that's a quantifiable starting point where, okay, now we can go to 30, we can go to 40. Sweet, that's hard. All right, let's back it back down to that 20. Let's increase your range, one click on the machine or whatever. So yeah, I mean, but then I've definitely had some people that have more pain of extension, and that's something I might find in the eval to where I can crank on their extension and it causes pain, but then I can take them to flexion. They're like, actually, that's pretty good. So again, like patellofemoral pain just being not super consistent. And is those different things, is it a little bit of chondromalacia, meniscus injury involved with all those things? And that's all different for everybody. Like, probably. Do we care about that stuff? No, because it's in everybody's knees. But like, it's just going to make it so it's not super specific. Where if you take 10 people with a quad tendinopathy, like, they're going to be different, but I think they're going to be a lot closer than 10 people with patellofemoral pain.
Yeah. What have you seen with the depth of a squat, feet are on the ground? Because I think even at like college athletics, I guess some girls would get like diagnosed with, well, women's basketball is like the big sport, but like some girls get like the trainer would say they have patellar tendon pain, so don't let them squat deep. And I was like, they don't have patellar tendon pain, but they probably have like patellofemoral. Um, what about, yeah, depth of a squat? Do you see anything of like you have patellofemoral pain, deep squats are going to be bad, or is it individual?
Yeah, yeah. I would say more commonly, yeah, like deep squatting is going to be something I can't jump to immediately. But it's in the same aspect, I don't like jumping and landing is not something we can jump to immediately as well, just like higher forces. Um, yeah, I mean, I would definitely say so. If we're squatting, we're probably going into a box first,
Mm,
like 95% of the time.
yeah. This whole thing makes it very different. Like I have my jumper's knee plan, which works for quad tendon because there's so many
Hmm.
objective, clear things you need to work on,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then it makes it impossible to come out with a patellofemoral program because it's
that'd be
like,
tough.
yeah, because
Yeah,
it's like
that'd be tough.
it would actually probably just be a suggestion of you need to self experiment with all of these different things, and I don't think people would necessarily be up for that. So this
Yeah,
your big thing is low backs, and you
yeah.
kind
So,
of,
yeah, it's fine. Yeah, for
yeah, the
sure.
spine. So like kind of your thinking, your philosophy around low back pain, you were like the sooner you can get them to a deadlift, and then anterior knee pain, sooner you get them on a leg extension. Are you looking at like non-specific low back pain as like maybe you don't care about a lot of the specifics of what's causing it, or
Pathology. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's pretty similar to your look at like patellofemoral joint pain.
Yeah, I mean, like for me, it's the same. Like, so same thing with the spine. Like, I'm getting you to flex, extend, side bend, rotate. Like, does that stuff cause pain? Irritability scale. Like, can I push on your back? Does it cause pain? Like, what cause? Like, oh, it doesn't hurt till you're at a 315 deadlift. Like, okay, irritability is super low. Where if you can't touch your toes without back pain, like, okay, irritability is kind of high. Like, that's gonna change where I start you in a rehab protocol as far as like exercises. But regardless, like we need to make you a strong, resilient human to pick things off the ground, and that's what a deadlift is. So, like, I want you to be ever prepared for those things. And I mean, for me, it may be a little personal bias on my end. Like, so many doctors, PTs, chiros, people in the strength space are like, dude, deadlifts aren't good for your back, yada yada yada, that's just crazy to me. Like, you know, for some people, doing a 315 Jefferson curl might not be great. But if you do it over, a long period of time, that's a really big goal of yours to get to. Like, why not? So it's just like what that person wants to do with their life. So yeah,
Hmm. That's this whole temperature analogy with the patellofemoral joint. Do you look at the low back the same way?
yeah, yeah. The irritability scale. I mean, that's how I look at really like anybody's pain. Like that irritability scale is huge for me. Like that's where my starting point is. But the same thing with the back. Like maybe the most comparable is like, okay, let's look at your loading pattern. Like, are you a person that sits on your butt all day in an office job where it's super super like not being used, or are you someone that like is on hands-on work like shoveling stuff, or you're working with your hands? Like those temperatures are going to be a lot different as far as how much we can actually move around with that. And if someone's just not moving, like if someone just they're getting 2,000 steps a day, we need to start with bigger picture stuff and just like your deadlift. Like we got to start talking about lifestyle stuff. So all that stuff kind of is like what goes into that factor of like how hot this person is.
Okay, yeah, this lifestyle stuff. I was telling you, I had a patellofemoral joint conversation with a guy, worked in NBA, saw a lot of patellofemoral joint pain, and
Mhm.
like a lot of concepts that were really fascinating to me. And then I think you were immediately like they're in a different boat than the average person getting patellofemoral joint pain because of like the lifestyle and recoverability
Yeah.
thing. Um, yeah, so for you, just seeing like the average person with patellofemoral joint pain, you're like that lifestyle is a huge thing for you.
Definitely. I mean, yeah, I mean, most individuals now, a college athlete, I mean, even a college athlete, like, I mean, if they're eating like shit in the cafe and sleeping 3 hours a night and staying up, like, dude, your knee's not getting better. Maybe a professional athlete that's, putting thousands of dollars into their body a year, probably not as much. Maybe, but probably not as much. But yeah, dude, I mean, another good example is I had a girl last year 100%. Like there was nothing I could have done rehabilitation wise was going to get her knee better. The patellofemoral pain is what I would call that. Started talking to lifestyle factors, and she's a vegan, which is fine, but it's going to be a lot harder to get real protein in being that. And I was like, look, like I'm not telling you to switch out your beliefs, whatever, but like we need to talk about protein. And like we went through like different ways to get that in, and like we basically quantified it that she's probably getting in a good 30, 40 grams of protein a day. And I was like, your knee's just not like you need building blocks to rebuild this knee, whatever we want to call it structurally. That's how I presented to her. I was like, I need like the rehab stuff's great. We're gonna take like a back seat to that, but for the next 2 months, I want you to focus on like I want you to eat like it's your job for protein. Like you need to change all your thinking of like what it is. It's not like pleasurable. It's like you're doing this to rebuild your knee. And in that 2 months, she made a significant increase in like her ability to work out. She's like a Peloton at home, kind of like Zumba type stuff. Like nothing super high weight, but she was willing to do whatever she needed, like rehab wise, and she was doing it to her capacity because she had some dumbbells and stuff. But like it just wasn't working, so we had to dip into that lifestyle bucket heavily for her because she was willing to do all the exercises and stuff. But with that kind of like nutrition and then getting poor sleep, I just don't see how anyone can get out of that circle with that kind of nutrition. So like that made a bigger difference for her than anything else to me.
Hmm. What does that conversation look like when you're talking about someone you got a patellofemoral person and you're trying to help them recover better? How are you addressing this?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I mean, like those are conversations I'm having with pretty much everyone, like on the irritability scale. Like, like, if someone's doing all the right things and they're super high irritability, I'm like, okay, like, are you just like overtraining a ton? Like, what do you do? Is your program super biased towards something? Like maybe looking into that. But for 95% of the people I'm seeing, which is your normal humans that are CrossFitting or running or playing rec sports or whatever, like those lifestyle factors can be a huge disconnect if people just don't think about those things at all. So like, I'm bringing up like, obviously I'm asking how you're sleeping. Like, if you have knee pain or back pain, and it's waking you up at night, higher irritability. If you're sleeping great, lower irritability. It's like all these things are just stacking. But, how I present the diet thing, because, I'm seeing most people are pretty good shape that I'm seeing. They're advocates for their own health. They're exercising in some capacity. Some people are a little bit overweight, and I'm not going to sit here and like dig into someone's nutrition for weight loss necessarily because that's not why they came to see me as a physical therapist. But presenting the like why protein is important to build structure in their body is something I think someone can kind of like be pretty neutral on, and coming from the place of like I just want you to feel better. Like I'm not telling you you need to eat protein because it's going to help you lose weight and it's going to make you a stronger human, which is all true. But I'm dipping into that because I want your knee to be better, your back to be better, and like this is why it's important. And people can, I think, taking that from a hey, like my body's made of protein. I obviously need more protein for it to build. Oh, that just makes sense. So like I think it's a little bit like it's easy for people to kind of digest that.
Hmm. The A lot of people that will get this pain or low back too they'll get imaging done. How much
Yeah.
how much
Oh yeah.
use are you using? Yeah, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the imaging thing. It's so overdone. Obviously, that's easy to say. Like, if we X-rayed or MRI'd everybody's back, the gym you go to and the gym I go to, we're going to find a lot of disc bulges, a bunch of arthritis, probably some changes, maybe a spondylolisthesis, some slippage of the disc or the vertebrae. Like that stuff's going to be there. Same with the knee. We're going to probably find some cartilage damage, maybe a meniscus tear, maybe some of this. Like that stuff's going to be there, especially if you've done any type of sports in your life or you get after it and you train for a period of time. But for me, it's how I presented. So another good example is I had a guy come in like literally like dragging his leg behind him, like really bad sciatica pain, like maybe like some nerve stuff going on the leg. It was like first day he's like, dude, like what do you think? Like should I get an MRI today? Or like I was like, well. let me answer that question in an hour, because if I can make any type of change in your pain the next hour, I think that's less likely. Now, if we're 3 to 4 sessions in, and your pain is absolutely no better or is getting worse, like, yeah, we might want to dip into that bucket. And he was a little bit better at the end of the session. I was like, dude, no, like, I feel really good about this. That person can relax and not worry about getting an image, because if that guy would have gotten an image, maybe there was a disc bulge. Maybe it wasn't causing his symptoms. Maybe it was, but I don't care. It's going to heal. Disc bulges heal on their own. Like he just cared about getting back in the gym because he's an active dude. So like do I dip into imaging? Like not really at all, unless it's obviously like a player that came in and like, hey, I heard a pop when I twist in the on the field, and I'm doing some ligament testing. I don't like what I see. Like, yeah, I'm missing that person for Mariah. Like, they probably tore an ACL or tore a ligament if it makes sense. But if you have no big mechanism of injury and you have back pain, or you're like, dude, I just like bent over and I was picking up, the dog's food or whatever, and my back pop, like, okay, that mechanism makes no sense for anything drastic. Let's not go to imaging, because then they're on the wheel of like they go get imaging, to go see the ortho, they're getting an injection, like they go down that whole path, and it's just I'm trying to get people off that for
Mhm.
sure, off the medical path.
Yeah. So this Greg Lehman, was he like the movement optimism kind of thing of like you can,
Yeah,
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 whatever, like you can just
yeah,
load, you can move.
yeah.
I'm probably not clearly representing what he's
Quite
saying, but
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. But anyways, your conversation sounds a lot like we've talked a lot about patellofemoral pain. Start loading yourself, work on the deficits and everything. Something that you talked about earlier was like the looking at the ankle and the hip, and that kind of makes me
Yeah,
like looking at that more so with the patellofemoral pain versus like the patellar tendon, where it's just like let's start loading, get a lot stronger. Not that the ankle and hip are unimportant, but maybe less important. So
sure.
like this whole thing of biomechanics, like you're in pain because of the way that you move. You're in pain because your
Yeah.
pattern is overloading. Yeah, how much are you putting stock in this idea?
I mean, yeah, for sure. I mean, for your runners, like, someone that's in a lot of pain, I'm not putting them in a running analysis when they're in a lot of pain, because it's going to look like shit. They're limping or whatever. But you're like, hey, look, like, digging into this life, if they're doing the lifestyle factors right, they're sleeping, they're eating pretty good, their training program, like for the most part, look pretty good. Like they're ramping up in a good way. Like, and they've had that hamstring issue for several years. They've had anterior knee pain off and on for several years. Like, okay, well, let's do look at like a running analysis. Like maybe you are loading, maybe you are, for something's going on, you're loading the anterior knee more, you have a short gait, or you're striking weird or whatever. Like we're definitely looking at that. And same with the squat. Like, I definitely have some people where you watch them squat, their heels are coming up, they're anterior loading the knee, they're forward, their thoracic spine sucks, they're doing front squats, they're all forward. So there's a lot of like, okay, you're anterior loading a lot more than you would if you could move better. So like, and that's just looking at the whole human of like, okay, we're gonna dig into those things maybe secondarily, but like, those are definitely things we're looking at for the long term. This, I don't want this to come back in a year. Like it's great to fix this, but you've had knee pain off and on for 4 years. Like there's a reason for that. There's no way you just like overloaded it one time, whether it be like a training thing or whatever. It got better with time or whatever, or you just stopped and it rested enough and it got better through that, and then come back. Like, okay, there's a reason for that. There's a way you're moving or something you're doing, whether it's overloading or whatever. Like, so yeah, but I mean, biomechanically, we're definitely looking at that. It depends on the person. Like, if it's a CrossFit athlete or it's a runner, we're looking at different things. Or if it's a ball player, we're looking at different things. Like, a basketball player, their hip internal rotation is not as important. If they're in a deep squat, they're in a bad position on the basketball court. Where if you're a power lifter, well, you're in a deep, very deep squat because you have to hit depth. Like that internal rotation is going to matter a lot more to me. So it just depends on the person.
Hmm. Do you have any with that anterior knee, like overloading, I guess tendon and or patellofemoral joint? If you're testing like joint ranges of motion or different things, have you seen any commonalities of like this person has anterior knee pain, their ankle presents in this way, or their hip is presenting in this way?
Yeah, I mean, for a person that has like specific knee pain with squatting, like a hip internal rotation lacking for sure is definitely something I'll see. I've seen it myself as well, and then ankle dorsiflexion for sure. But a lot of people use lifters nowadays that power lift or CrossFit. It kind of like takes the ankles out of it. Um, I would say mostly like a tendinopathy, typically taken through that joint range, nothing. Like unless someone's in a really flared up position, like they just blew it up like that day or the day before, there's no pain. Where patellofemoral pain, like typically there'd be some, like when I crank you in an extension or flexion, like there's some reproduction of pain with like a mild irritability with someone that has that. It's like we're causing some joint stress. low level, but that's going to flare something up where I would say tendinopathy typically is like, no, dude, my knee's completely fine unless I go do a step down test or load it or jump or what else, higher level stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I've had this thought. I'm curious on your take on it. I think it was Jared Anflick I did a podcast with maybe a couple of years ago, and he was talking about the loads that go through the Achilles tendon when you do sports or even walking or like many times body weight.
Yeah.
And then like
Yeah.
the patellar tendon is a bit less, but then if you look at like the low back, it's like very minimal if you're doing like
Yeah.
just day-to-day stuff or athletics and stuff. So it's like very specific loading is required for the Achilles tendon to get that thing back. Patellar
Yeah.
tendon probably somewhat similar. Then it's like patellofemoral, but low back. Do you kind of? It makes me look at it that it's like Achilles tendon rupture, Achilles tendon pain is like probably have to be very specific loading that exact tissue. I guess probably patellar quad tendon too, but then like patellofemoral, low back, are you putting those in more just like a system wide issue?
Yeah. I definitely agree with that
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say that. Wait, did you cover manual therapy? The
Yeah, yeah.
cut.
So I mean, I do some dry needling cupping, like some soft tissue work to the quad or around the knee, like for sure. Like I'll do some joint distraction and stuff like that, just like kind of getting the knee moving, just moving. I mean, for me, like how I present that is like we're just moving fluid. We're kind of like calming the joint down, whether it be just like some fluid exchange with some passive range of motion, whether it be like A to P or P to A, like joint mobilization, whether it be just like some passive range of motion, some patellar mobilization, some quad needling. It gets a lot of free contractions of the quad. That's typically very low irritability as far as like causing pain, but can decrease some pain. Typically I'm not going to stretch a quad super aggressively with either one of those, but doing some cupping and kind of going through some easy range of motion just to kind of let that quad calm down a little bit because typically you have a lot of guarding of the knee or to the quad. That's going to just put a little bit more compression on the knee. So when you go to load it, it's just that much more ticked off. So definitely dipping into those buckets early, and then it's when we don't have to use those is more like moving away from them. But it's definitely nice to be able to like quantify and say, hey, look, like you just did an air squat and had pain. We did some whatever insert dry manual therapy, and now it's not like that's a win to me. Sure, it's not going to last, but if you can now move and load that knee more in an hour, like okay, we're moving forward in some capacity. Where to not use those at all, I think I think it'll work, but it's just a little slower, at
Yeah.
least day to day.
If you could, how long have you been doing physical therapy?
4.5 years.
Okay. If you could go back to like your first cases of low back pain, your first cases of patellofemoral joint pain, yeah, what did that look like?
Yeah, so like for me, like coming with a really for me a really good strength conditioning background, like I wasn't dipping into really any of those manual therapies at all. Like, hey, look, if this hurts, like we're just gonna like trial stuff, or we're just gonna generally move, like especially like low back. Like if we just get someone warmed up on a bike and get moving, and get sweaty, like typically the back's gonna feel a little better. But I mean, I was definitely heavily into we can exercise out of everything, which I think I still believe to a capacity, but I think there's definitely some better levers to pull. Like I wasn't dipping into those lifestyle factors at all and having these conversations. I was just like, look, dude, like you just need to exercise and we just need to find out where you can do that pain free for long enough and it's going to get better. Like that's kind of where I started, which my opinion is that's better than most PTs. Most PTs are just giving you the same generic stuff over and over again, hoping and praying that they're going to get better eventually. Where at least we are doing some progressive overload, but it just might be as slow as we need it to be. So yeah, in general, just treatment wise, like when I started out, it was just like, hey, look, like we need to exercise. But I'd say a turning point for that was when I started to see some higher level people like they don't need to exercise more. They're pretty freaking fit. They're working on their sport or whatever. Like I don't that's not my job to make them fitter or better at their sport. I can't make a basketball player better at their sport skill wise because I didn't play basketball. So like I shouldn't try to lean into that at all. But is there some stuff I can do with my hands or like some conversations we can have like, hey dude, like you know I'm not going to make you better at basketball, but if we don't stop loading this every single day, like you're going to have this for the rest of your career, and you at 70% is never going to be a great player. So like conversational education is something I'm dipping into way more than I did in the beginning. And maybe it's just because I've had enough reps and I've seen it enough to where I feel confident in what I'm saying, but like that's definitely a clear difference.
Yeah, the when you do physical therapy school, do you have like 1 year where you're going on? what do they call it? Rotations or something?
Clinicals, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But you have to go to every setting. So like one of those was a skilled nursing facility. You know, if as long as you can walk and go to the bathroom, you're good. Hospital, similar. And then I went to like a big box ortho, which is, general population, mostly older people. They don't necessarily want to work out. They just want to be out of pain and they want it today. They don't want to do the thing you told them to do at home. So just it's kind of a sucks population. And then my last clinical is where I had my first job. And it was, to me, like the best insurance-based place you could be in to where we are seeing people for 45 minutes one-on-one. And generally the people coming in do want to be, healthy and work on things and have some motivation to get better. They want to play with their kids. They want to play that rec sport. They want to be able to go to the gym consistently for the most part. We saw everybody though, but so like I definitely saw it in all aspects. But those clinical experiences, really only one of those set me up to like actually learn something. Where the other three, like it's pretty easy, Like if you have any type of like care in the world, like you can do that job pretty well.
Mm. You were never part of physical therapy friends who are like they call it the physical therapy mill. Is that what they call it? Where you're like,
Yeah, no, yeah, yeah, yeah. You're crushing two people. They're seeing you for the eval. They're coming back next Tuesday. They're gonna do the same five things that you just put on that list, but someone's gonna watch them in their attack or a PTA or whatever. Maybe they get a progression. Maybe they go from a 10-pound kettlebell to a 15 if they're feeling good that day. But it's just total crap. I mean, there's just no like no one likes that. There's no way they do. I don't care what they say. They just don't know what the difference is.
but you never got stuck in that.
No, I did one clinical there, and thankfully it was during COVID, so they couldn't do the big like four people an hour. They had to go to one-on-one because of COVID laws or whatever. So yeah, I would have. I mean, I knew in school I would never work for a place like that. I despise those places.
Yeah,
Absolutely
yeah.
despise them. Are there good PTs there? Absolutely. Like some people, that's just where they work and they're doing a good job. They're hustling in there, but the system's set up for them not to give the best care, and that's just really unfortunate.
If you could imagine, I'm biased. A lot of my friends are strength coaches, and then if they are physical therapists, they have a good knowledge of strength conditioning, and other
Yeah,
people not so much. How where do you think you would be without the strength conditioning knowledge?
as a physical
Yeah.
therapist. It's not a profession. I mean, like, it's not a profession at all. I mean, I think like I think we should be, this is in physical therapy school. I think strength conditioning as a principle of education should be at least 10 times bigger than it is, at least where my university was. Like, if you're going to PT school and you're not a runner, an athlete, you're not exercising in some capacity. I'm like, I really don't understand. I went to school with a lot of those people, like they don't exercise. I'm like, I don't understand how you can be a doctor of exercise, if you will, in physical therapy and not do the thing. Like, I think if I had a conversation with a strength coach, we should be able to have a great conversation and talk principles pretty fluently back and forth, and feel like we both are like, yeah, that dude's not an idiot. Like it just should feel pretty like evenly matched. Now, I think the biggest difference is, strength coaches is dipping into like a lot of athletes from a quantity standpoint. They're getting a lot of reps, people, whether it be one-on-one or teams or whatever. And in the physical therapy side of things, is a lot more biased towards like rehabilitation, body work, doing the manual therapies. But like, there's a lot of blend of that. I think there's just some things a strength coach, is not from a tool perspective doesn't have, but they're also working with populations that are far different. Like a physical therapist is going to take a college soccer team through, an off-season, in-season training program. So it's just different roles, but there's a lot of overlap of what we should know and be able to pull into buckets for sure.
Yeah, the one of Derek Garza's in California, and he's a lot of plyometrics physical therapist, and he's
Yeah,
told me of the. I mean, even I look at the basic. I guess in the tendon world, is like I give a lot of isometrics and lifting in early phases, but then it's like we need some like return to sport, store and release, and
yeah,
he's like that is something that's even worse than the strength, like pushing the
yeah,
strength
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. I agree.
Yeah, so like how could it even be possible for these physical therapists to learn like return to sport plyometric loads, how to progress someone running to sprinting? Yeah, how does that even get done?
Yeah, I mean, you have to do it yourself. Like, I mean, obviously, there's education out there for that. I mean, in the world now, there's so much stuff on the internet just to learn just from on the internet. Like to not know any of that is absolutely crazy to me. Now, for me personally, like the athletes I see and like in the phase of rehab that I see them through, like my plyometric protocol is pretty simple. Like I'm not doing anything crazy with that. I'm doing some sprinting, I'm doing some jumping, but from a very basic level. But also the people I'm seeing, maybe haven't sprinted in several years, or maybe don't jump besides a box jump or something. So like I'm keeping it simple on purpose. But also I do think like there's a really good, and I can't quote the dude's name. It's from some strength conditioning conference several years ago. The guy kind of went through like basic jump progressions, and I thought how he presented it was like just fantastic. Of like, hey, look, like let's take these basic jumps and you don't need to progress the complexity of them. You're just going to do them better. You're going to be faster coming off the ground. Your cues are just be better at those things, and you're going to rehearse those and just make sure you're doing them, twice a week or whatever your frequency is. So yeah, so for me, it's like if you don't have at least a base level of knowledge of that, that's just a you problem. Like there's so much education out there to like kind of just dip into that, whether it be some type of Con Ed course or just YouTube videos, like strength conditioning stuff. That stuff's put out there. Like a lot of the live stream stuff gets put on YouTube anyways. Now, like if it's going to be super specific to like a basketball team, that's not my job. That's a strength conditioning's job. Like to get really specific with like sports specific rehab, or not rehab, but training for plyometrics. Like that's not my world. I don't have a ton of reps of that. I'm not going to try to implement that. But if I have a basketball player, like you need to basically be able to do like some sort of vertical jump, horizontal jump, jump and rotate, like some basic principles. Like, and if you can do that, like from a rehab standpoint, I feel really good about you going back to your team and working with your rehab, your strength conditioning coach, and take it from there. So I don't think it's our job to know everything, but to kind of dip into those worlds, some sprint mechanics, like things like that. Absolutely.
Hmm. All right, last thing I got for you. What are you most excited about right now in the physical therapy world?
As a profession,
Yeah, or just for
ooh, yeah, that's a
yourself,
good.
just for yourself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, well, I mean, as a profession and as myself, so yeah, so yeah, kind of just going back to where I started. So I'm down here in Tampa, Florida, opening up Onward Physical Therapy, which is a franchise company around the country. So we are an out-of-network physical therapy company, which we don't bill insurance directly. So we are out of pocket, which means we're not cheap, but we're doing it definitely a different way than your mills will. So we are giving someone every ability to have every type of manual therapy access to that. People that do care and are going to spend an hour with you, have a great follow up, and really like make sure those people are supported in their rehab journey or their strength conditioning journey. And for that to grow, that's a little bit unique as a profession and a place around the country. But right now we're in about 35 cities around the country, and Tampa being the one I'll be in. For that physical therapy to grow and be like the norm, I'm super freaking excited about for someone to like, hey, look, like I didn't have that bad experience with a PT where I went in. Yeah, I went in and like they gave me these exercises that were way too easy. They got put off on a PTA and like, yeah, it was okay. Like we're so far from that it might as well not be the same thing. Like for that to grow, that's what I'm super excited about. Like, I mean, any profession has good and bad, right? But I think physical therapy gets hated a lot from the strength conditioning world because of the ignorance of PTs thinking, yeah, we have a doctorate, which means like we're these like pros of strength conditioning, but you go talk to like a real strength coach and they're like, yeah, that dude doesn't know how to lift. He doesn't know how to load. Like, and they're right though. Like, let's clear that gap up, where like that's not a thing. Like, this company's taken that, head on kind of and like really saying like, hey, look, like we want to be the new brand of physical therapy 2.0, if you will, offering people all those different options. So that's what I'm excited about. And then me to be a part of that.
Yeah, I I went to physical therapy for years for my patellar tendon, and it was terrible.
Years. That's
It was
crazy, right?
terrible.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
crazy.
I even had an older lady. I was
Uh,
like 20, and she's like, "What do you want to do?" And I'm like, "I want to dunk basketballs again." She's like, "I don't know if it's gonna happen." It's like,
yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah,
20 years
yeah.
old. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, they're
Yeah.
like ACL rehab are like, yeah, once you can start walking, like discharged. I'm like, that person played high level like college soccer. Like, what? Like, what do you mean? What do you mean they're good? Like, they're so far from good. Their quad's probably shit. They've done no jumping. They've done no sports specific stuff, no cutting. Like, they're setting themselves up for never playing again or re-tearing or tearing the other knee or just something bad. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. All right. Tell people well, you told us where you're at, but online, where can people find you?
Yeah, so the page is onward_Tampa is the Instagram page. That's where my business is. So we're down in Old Tamar, Tampa. So we're right off the city. And then my personal Instagram is Dr. Colby_DPT. So Dr. Physical Therapy. Yeah, and you reach out for any questions or anything, or if someone's local to the area, would love to have a conversation if someone has an issue. So
Perfect. It has my brain working now on the way I look at patellofemoral pain.
system
Yeah,
issue,
yeah,
system issue.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, man. Thanks for coming on.
So he did.